Hi everyone, so it's almost the end of the month, and with that it's time for another Diablo 4 quarterly update. So here's the December blog post that we have just received last night. I went through it with Stream Chat and we were talking about it, and I want to give my thoughts and impressions a little bit, and maybe also hear from you guys how you think this is and how that makes you feel. Maybe have some ideas or some concerns, and we want to go through it now. So this blog post is about the Paragon system. So we're going to see a bit of about the endgame and the character customization, which actually looks pretty interesting, I believe. And then there's also lots of like visual effects stuff and behind the scenes stuff for like how the game is built. So that is actually also really cool. So overall, the game looks amazing, especially with the graphics are nuts, I believe. And you're gonna see that down in some demonstrations. So I'm not gonna read through the whole thing here. You can find the link in the description if you wanna read it all. But they have been talking about how they have made a lot of progress, building the world, building the game systems, and now they wanna show off a little bit. So first of all, they talk about itemization. So for example, plus skill rank after come back. So this is going to be very similar to Diablo 2, where you have items that give you, plus that skill or plus this skill, which either makes it more powerful, or you actually gain access to a skill through that item when you previously didn't invest into it at all. So this can actually be quite interesting, I believe. I believe this is a fine system. So it also sounds very much like you're going to level up and then unlock more and more skills, and it's not going to be like Diablo 3 where you just get all the skills for free, but you rather have to have a limited resource spent on them. So that is actually pretty cool. So you can kind of like specialize and at the same time also like grab some skill from some other part of the tree or whatever, how it's going to look like, and actually have some combos available to you. Potentially you could even get skills from other classes like you can do in Diablo 2. So I think this could actually make for some quite interesting combinations. So I'm quite excited to see this actually. Next up, they're talking about legendary and unique items. So we have seen some of those in the past. They work basically rather similar to like Diablo 3 legendaries, but typically with lower values. So you have like some special abilities that gives extra power to some skill. I think here's an example or two when you scroll down. So there's, for example, this Fury skills deal more damage for every second you haven't used a Fury skill, up to 24%, barbarian only. So you can see this is like some legendary axe here. And they talk about this new NPC called the Occultist that can basically transform an item into an essence. And you can use that essence with the same legendary power and imbue, for example, rare items with that essence. So you can see how this is done here. So you have the axe with the special effect, then you make it just the essence which only has a special effect. And here is like a random rare amulet, and you get put on this essence. So it keeps exactly the same stats, and it has like the extra power. So it seems like it's a bit more like customizable. For example, they allow certain legendary powers to roll on different slots. So it's not just, okay, you have this, one echoing fury power that is only on the mace, but it can also be on like a two-handed weapon, it can also be in a glove, and that's kind of how this system works. So it seems like you can actually kind of like mix and match things a little bit more, and it's not just super locked in with this item in that slot. So that can actually be very interesting. And if the power level of those legendary effects is not like super ridiculous, as we have seen it in Diablo 3, for example, I believe this can actually be really cool, where you really like add up different combinations and maybe swap out one thing for another thing here and there. And I'm pretty sure that there's probably also some way to replace the legendary affix of an item without actually destroying the item, for example. So I'm pretty sure they're gonna have some system like that, and this is definitely looking pretty cool, I think. One missing part about the endgame item hunt is also that you can kind of target farm certain item types. So they say this here, for example, the bandits have like maces and crossbows and boots, and pants can drop more of them from the ground. So I think that's actually a really cool way to introduce some kind of target farming. So there's like a higher chance to find a certain like legendary or unique item or like this item type from certain monsters. So you want to maybe go through that dungeon more often just to maybe upgrade this one item that you're missing, or you go out in like some outdoor zones and you farm there. So I believe this is something that definitely is missing from some other games, where you just kind of like rely on random drops all the time, and then you have maybe something like Kadada to gamble for an item slot, and you have like a higher chance of getting that stuff. But typically the loot chances are basically exactly the same almost anywhere, and I think having such a system in place is actually a pretty cool way to create diversity for the gameplay, because you're not just focusing on like this one most effective like farming zone or something, but instead you want to go out and actually hunt down specific items maybe that you haven't found yet. So that is actually a really cool addition. So now comes the really big part, which is the Paragon Board, and this one has really strong Powerful Exile passive tree vibes, I gotta say. So this is like the initial like concept here, I believe. So this doesn't seem finished at all to me. I believe they probably made this quite recently, because it looks very basic from like the graphical look of it at least. But essentially this is like a passive tree, and the way this works is that you start at one of those like exits here with those little like tiles. They call it like exit tile, I believe. And then you can kind of like point by point travel through the board, and you can kind of like choose different like minor effects. For example, like get like +5 strength, or maybe a bit of damage, or maybe a bit of attack speed, some like basic stats. And then you also have some bigger tiles, like these rare ones here. They give like special effects. And here are also like sockets where you can, I think this is probably one of those where it's like socketed, and you can put in like a glyph, and they will buff all the like surrounding other passives here and give some other bonus. So that's kind of how that works. And you can kind of like choose different stats here. You can either like max out this entire area that maybe gives you like a specific stat you really want, or you just travel through and try to grab like the big ones. And there's also like a legendary one in the middle. And essentially you travel through the whole thing, and you go to another exit tile. So you start at one side, you go through to the other side or to one of the sides, and then you can like access the next Paragon Board. And so you kind of like start piecing them together. So you have number 1, and then you have number 2, and then you have number 3. So this is somehow how this is going to work. So they try to explain it a little bit, and this is what I have gotten from this. So here's an example of how these things actually look. So for example, here the common tiles, +5 strength, then you have a magic tile that gives you like maybe another like stat kind of effect, and then you have rare ones that give you, for example, here fury per kill, and then you have maybe some requirements. For example, it needs 175 strength, 125 willpower. You also get increased maximum fury, which might buff some of your skills. And here's like a legendary one, while your fury is above 50%, you do 30% more damage. So you can see that these can be quite powerful, and that as you level up and as you progress through these tiles, you want to maybe grab certain tiles that you really want to maybe like fix some resists, or fix some stat requirements, or just get like these super powerful effects. So I believe the system is actually quite interesting, and if you compare this to like the PoE passive tree, this actually looks quite similar. But the thing is that here on the Paragon board, this is kind of like piece by piece with like a very small passive tree, so to say. So you go through this, and then you go to the next one, and then you start from scratch on like a fresh board that has very few points here. So you kind of like check out, okay, what are the stats, what are the rare tiles that I want to get, and then you kind of like make a little pathing. And it's not really as like intimidating and complicated as having like this whole thing here at once, I believe. So this is really a strong advantage from this Paragon board system, I believe. I'm not really sure like how like finite or infinite this Paragon board system is going to be, considering that some of these stats are actually incredibly powerful. I don't believe they're just going to give us like infinite Paragon grinding like they did in Diablo 3, where you can literally farm +5 main stand forever, and then also get these super crazy powerful effects here, like legendary tiles once in a while after farming X levels. So I don't know how often this is going to be, but this looks like maybe they have spent like 50 points here on this board, and then you can like add the next one and get the next legendary tile with like another 20 points maybe, and then maybe you can like quickly traverse through and do another one. So the interesting part about these boards is you can rotate them, and also you can add other boards at each side wherever you have traveled with your points. So like this, you have quite some like interesting customization, and also they talk about replayability. And I believe this is actually very true. So I believe that you can really, go in, make another character, specialize on completely different things simply through this system. And I don't think that it's really gonna be too overwhelming to try to make something work with this. But yeah, it remains to be seen when they maybe flesh out the system a bit more. So this is still quite basic, as I have said, because we don't really know what all these stats are gonna do. We just have an example of one tile and one tile here and stuff like that. So we would have to see exactly how this is gonna play out, how many points you are actually expected to get after X hours, and all these kind of things. Like, are you gonna have 100 points maybe? Are you gonna have 500 points? How many of these boards are you gonna puzzle together? So we'll see. But in the end, quite some interesting 3D chess stuff with rotating it and going this path or the other path and then adding another board there. Here's actually an example of this in action. So this wasn't working yesterday, I believe, because I haven't seen this before. But yeah, here they select this Paragon board and they rotate it and then add it to the other Paragon board they already have. So this is basically how it's gonna be. And considering that Paragons are probably gonna be acquired quite slowly, especially after the initial first hours or so of being at max level, I believe that the system is actually gonna be rather slow paced, and you have a long time to kind of make decisions and just go bit by bit basically. In any case, looks quite interesting. I believe this is also probably gonna be made a lot more pretty. This seems again a very basic feature so far, and I totally imagine that they're probably gonna make it a bit more with some icons everywhere and some colors, and you can kind of understand which tile has what stat depending on how they look. And yeah, we'll see about that. So quite excited for this system in general. So character customization is something that personally I was very worried about, and I think this system alone can pretty much solve that issue already, because you have suddenly so much customization. You can go in different paths, and on top of that you have this legendary power or essence conversion here, like we had seen with the occultist. So that can actually make for some really cool stuff. All the skill trees and the passive tree that we had seen prior to this were way too basic in my opinion. So there was not really any choices. There was just, okay, you move along this one branch and then maybe at some point it branches into two and you can kind of choose this or that effect, and that was about it. So I think something like this is a much more interesting system that also creates much higher longevity, because you can literally replay the same character class 50 times if you like, and play it in completely different ways, at least the way that I imagine. Okay, so enough speculation about how the game is gonna be. Let's look at some actual cool stuff here. So there's a lot of visual effects. They talk about how they want to make sure that everything feels nice and smooth and impactful, and they want to make sure that they have really cool combat animations and stuff like that. So they talked about how, for example, they have changed the hitboxes of certain abilities. So you see this here, for example, with the whirlwind on the barbarian, where he whirls around, and now they made it so that basically as you spin, you hit basically wherever the weapon is in that moment, instead of just an AoE around you at all times that pulses. And you can see this here in action where he whirls through those goats and then they kind of die one by one. And this is similar here with some other abilities. So he has this ground smash or whatever, and you see that it kind of expands in the sequence and not all at once. So you can see here that the damage is applied at each moment when the abilities, graphical effects are actually hitting the enemy. So that's really cool stuff, I believe. So it looks very awesome. I think the graphics are amazing, and the detail that they have put there is really cool. And if they go forward with this kind of design, I think the gameplay flow and the smoothness are probably going to be pretty much unmatched. Yeah, here's some other fancy stuff like the lighting. So they have this example here with I think the sorcerer skill, where she has some fire skills and this lightning spark or whatever that is called. So you see here that they're flying around, and you can see how it's lighting up everything. It looks very pretty in my opinion. So I have no doubts that this game is gonna be basically top notch when it comes to the immersion and the graphics, and probably also the sound effects. So they've already talked about the sound design the other time. So I'm not very worried about any of that. I believe it has been looking very good so far, and yeah, it seems like they are really paying attention to detail there, do a lot of different things, which is just gonna make the game feel very good. One interesting change they have added is that they allow skill customization. So this is one example here where you have like a higher damage version or like a higher AoE version of certain skills. So you see this here, it's like the same ability, but it can be altered in some way with like increased area of effect, or maybe you know, like hitting more targets or something like that. I believe that's very cool. Like skill customization makes the game much more interesting. So this is definitely something that is very appreciated by people that want to play like a character class in a different way, and not just, you know, stack up the same skill over and over for a little bit more damage or so. And I believe there can also be a lot more interesting effects. So I could imagine that, you know, maybe have like a repeat of an ability, or instead of like a bigger AoE, it's actually maybe smaller, but it has like another effect. Or you know, there could be all kinds of effects and runes, or however they want to call it, to like change how a skill works. I think this can definitely be very cool. So I hope there's gonna be like a lot of really nice legendary powers that do that, and like some stuff in the passive tree and the skill tree, and you can not just stack up like very boring like plus damage effects, and instead you have like, you know, some other effects where it just changes how a skill works, because this allows for, you know, a lot of gameplay customization in the end. Here's also a short preview of weapon buffs. So apparently we're gonna have some way of imbuing our weapons, maybe through like a permanent enchantment or something, or maybe some like, you know, consumable like a potion or whatever, where, you know, you have like a flaming weapon effect and a poison weapon effect and these kind of things. So I think this can be pretty cool. Also looks pretty amazing, I gotta say. So yeah, as I said, the graphical part of the game is definitely on point in my opinion. Here they also talk about skill-driven devs, so how they have built like this like model structure to where you can, like, for example, burn away the skin of enemies, or you can like cleave them in half, or like you basically burn away like the entire like flesh and it's only a skeleton left. So here you can see that they have like basically different like versions of an enemy, so that you can actually apply all these like graphical effects depending on which skill you hit them with or which skill you kill them with. And you can also see like some like example here of the druid trying this out against some enemies here, and then like you also see like the blood spill and all these kind of things, and like he's getting like you know, full of blood himself, and then like, yeah, it slowly disappears. So the animations look smooth and crisp, and I think it's gonna be very fancy, especially like this super smooth, you know, transitioning from one form to another, and like, you know, the kind of like immersive effect of for example, you know, hitting an ability with like a certain element, like a fire ability, and that actually burns the enemy and these kind of things. I think that's actually pretty cool stuff. So I talk a little bit about, you know, what you can do with certain like sorcerer skills and barbarian skills. So here's like freeze and shatter, and there's char and burn, and then you have like crush, so you like make them flat and then you know, completely smashed. Then you have decapitate, you know, cut off the monster's head. You have cut in half. So there's like these kind of like special effects that can appear depending on where and how you hit the monster with a certain ability. So here are some examples of that. So you see a variety of different classes now using their abilities, and you know, you look at the monsters when they die and how the corpse, for example, keeps burning and like becomes like a pile of coal and stuff like that, or they shatter from the ice skills and these kind of things. So we have definitely seen this before, but I think I've really like done a good job here, like, you know, making this look a bit more realistic than, you know, we might remember. And yeah, there's like lots of really cool stuff here. Basically you see like they pop from the ice explosion and stuff like that, and then these other guys are burning. And here's like the barbarian that is like you know, like smashing stuff. And here when he finishes this enemy, he has like broken his limb now, and then he smashed him, and the other guys are just like completely disappearing basically. And you have these kind of things there that every class has like their own little like effects, for example. So here's like the rogue as well, with like his shadow and poison stuff and like going really fast. So obviously this is my class here, and yeah, looks pretty cool in general. So I'm quite excited to see how this will play out in the end. Yeah, and this also concludes the video. So you can go read through the blog if you like. I have the link in the description, as I said in the beginning. So this is just my impressions so far. I believe looks really amazing. Like the graphics especially are on point, like, the attention to detail is really cool. And I believe that this Paragon system especially, which is probably kind of like the most controversial point and the most talked about here in this whole update, is actually gonna be pretty good. So it remains to be seen exactly like the details of it, like how much of it you're gonna have and you know how interesting it will be. But I believe it's definitely a step in the right direction for character customization, for build customization, for replayability. So I am not really too concerned in that sense. In the end, the game is probably still like a minimum of 1.5 years away or so. So I believe there's gonna be many tweaks done to all those systems, to all those effects, to basically everything you can imagine. And we're gonna see how it's gonna be in the end. But so far I'm definitely optimistic about how it's gonna look. So this is it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys next time.